I'm Bill Beck. I'm the chair of the governing members. We want to welcome you to this coffee and conversation. And again, thank you for your contribution you dedicated to our Pacific Symphony. We have two honored guests today. John Evans, who's the chair of the board of directors. John's been with the symphony about 3.5 decades, I understand. And John Forsyte, president and CEO of Pacific Symphony. And I'm just going to turn it over to John Evans to kick it off. John?
Well, thank you very much. As Bill mentioned, I'm chair of the board, and this is my second go around. I was chair also in the late 80s, and so John Forsyte and the board are giving me another opportunity to try to do it right this time. And indeed, we're a different organization than we were before. But I want to welcome our guests today. And I want to thank you all and Bill Beck for your support and for your invitation. The board of directors created the governing members as a support and advisory organization to help the Pacific Symphony achieve its long-term goals, to greatly expand its impact in Orange County and the region, as well as enhance its artistic standing as a major symphony. So I'm going to talk a few things about what was it like in the 80s. I joined the board almost 3.5 decades ago. What were the struggles and early successes? What were the pivotal moments in our history? I will tell you, in my view, what those pivotal moments were. I've marked 3 pivotal moments, and when I get to them, I'll tell you what they are in my mind. So I arrived here in November the 1st, 1986, from Utah. I was in Utah with my family for 6 or 7 years. Before that, I'd been living in the Middle East and in Europe in my job. And I took a little hiatus to work in Utah. And there I was on the Utah Symphony Board and Executive Committee. There's a musical background in my family. My grandmother was trained in Berlin with Leopold Godowsky, and my own mother was also a pianist. And so in my family, I had intense encouragement for piano and other instruments, which I played, but I had other interests as well, such as motorcycles and skiing. And so I wasn't as diligent when I was young as I should have been. So I keep a journal, and it goes back to 1964. I've also written a personal memoir, including 4 generations before me, going back to the early 1800s. It's all digitized. In that writing, Pacific Symphony, the term Pacific Symphony comes up 453 times. I looked at it this morning. And tonight, it'll probably be 454 times. John, you as president come up in that journal 106 times. Yes, the Pacific Symphony is part of my life, an enriching part. A part I can't live without. Even in trials, making the triumphs ever even more elating. So it reminds me of a quote by Khalil Gibran. I read his works thoroughly in high school and college, and this comes from a tear and a smile. Quote, "A tear to purify my heart and give me understanding of life's secrets and hidden things. A smile to draw me nigh to the sons of my kind and to be a symbol of my glorification of the gods." So for me, it's important not only to get through the trials, but also that gives us perspective as we enjoy the heights, many of which I've had through my association with the symphony. January the 26th, 1987 was my first board meeting. I was introduced by Betty Moss, executive director of the Business Committee for the Arts. And that first board meeting was in the basement of the Pacific Symphony headquarters at 115 East Santa Ana Boulevard, the building that housed the Presbyterian Church and was built in 1911, an old building that recently burned down. A sad event. But in the summer, there was no air, and in the winter, it was cold, and rats scurried around in the basement and the rafters. Our board meetings were in the basement. Tables were placed end to end with folding chairs and green velvet cloth to cover the uneven tables. Lighting was poor. You can imagine the scene. Carl wrote about this a few years later when he came to us about those first rehearsals. And those first rehearsals of his were in the basement, or were in that old building. He said, quote, my first meeting and rehearsal with the orchestra, Tchaikovsky 6 and Mozart, I can still hear the words, my first meeting and rehearsal with the orchestra, those works, I can still hear the words of Luce Bisto introducing me to the orchestra. I see the faces of the musicians so clearly. Mahler 8th was rehearsed in that church. So 5 months after I joined the board in 1987, I was elected to be chair of the board on June the 22nd, 1987, in that same basement boardroom. In that setting, I knew all the founders, worked with them on the board, was in their homes. We were a family, and I loved them. One was Tom Key, the first chairman of the board. He was a pilot in the Berlin airlift who flew food and supplies to the blockaded West Germans after the war. One of those Germans was a little girl standing out on the runway, waiting to receive her food. And I would work with her years later, another connection to Tom and to Germany, where I also lived for years. So here is pivotal moment number 1. This is August 1987. Within weeks, we began thinking of a change in artistic leadership to advance us beyond a regional orchestra. This was traumatic. I wrote, in the Symphony Executive Committee, we have been thinking whether to make a change with the music director, Keith Clark. It has been a very painful thing for me because I do not want to see anyone in discomfort. That is Keith. I like him a lot, but wonder if he is the one for us right now. Then, in February 1988, was a hard month for the symphony. We had our final vote regarding the music director, Keith Clark, and to consider renewing his contract. There were many differing opinions, and in a close, secret vote, we opted not to renew. Because of the extreme sensitivity with patrons, board, not knowing how Keith would react, what the papers would do with it, what orchestra members would do, I did my best to remain quite neutral. It was difficult to field the newspaper's pointed questions. Keith was angry. He told the Times that the real story was that the association was on the verge of financial ruin. The Times headline the next day was, after they spoke with me, Pacific Symphony president denies financial woes. The chairman then was called president, and the president of the symphony that John is now is president, not executive director. So there's a change in terminology there. Then December 31st, 1987, an evening in Old Vienna, the concert of Strauss and others, followed by a reception at the West End. It was a sellout. The LA Times reported that it was a most successful night, that we netted between $3,000 and $5,000. Our last gala, by the way, and to compare, we raised $1.8 million. The early ones, we felt good. The early galas, we felt good if we raised 100 or 150,000. And our opening nights now raise hundreds of thousands, but our budget has grown substantially as well as we progress and add in many ways, and we add many ways to our communities. For example, education is a bigger percent of budget than any other major orchestra. Much of it's to support Title I economically disadvantaged students. And an outcome of the Pacific Symphony Youth Orchestra, I see Elizabeth Starr here, who chaired that for many years. An outcome is the Pacific Symphony Youth Orchestra and the achievement of many of those young musicians now in major universities, turning their lives around as first generation educated. I'm grateful for that. And thank you, Elizabeth. There are pressures in chairing these events. So Ruth Ann had a dream in 2017, just before a pre-gala kickoff party. She was chairing that. She was stressing on where to have it. She dreamt about it with a real solution in that dream. So now I'm quoting again from what she told me. It's in my journal, the solution to her dream, or to her dilemma of where to have that kickoff party. In her dream, quote, in her dream, Humphrey Bogart called her and told her he has heard about this magnificent gala and he wanted to participate too. He suggested that the pre-gala party be held at his home. Of course, there would be some conditions, but he had heard far and wide of Ruth Ann's planning for such an event and wanted to have the party at his home. I doubt this will happen, since he has been dead since 1957. As Ruth Ann told me of this very out of their dream, I thought of one of the conditions that would be that Bogart would have to still be living, not to mention a host of other things. This gala must really be on Ruth Ann's mind, with some pressures to generate such a dream. What was going on in her mind last night? Well, the Podlicks did call her that next day and said, have it at our house. A nice outcome, but disappointed not to see Humphrey. Okay, March 1988 from Journal. Ruth Ann and I had just gotten to our seats at 8 o'clock at the concert hall, the Segerstrom Center, and we're settling in for a wonderful concert. Then staff and a board member came to me. Keith is not coming out until he talks to you. I responded, tell him to do the program, we'll talk after. Another few minutes passed. He would not come out. So I went back to see him. His bio had inadvertently been left out of the program. I imagined going out on the stage to say there would be no concert that night and refund $60,000, and that our music director was busy throwing a tantrum. But the night proceeded and we made amends. Ticket sales for the next season, I wrote, have been coming in wonderfully. For a while, I thought we would be out of money. By the time the ticket revenue began coming in, we were down to under $1,000. How would I have closed down the symphony? How would the public respond? I can't even tell you the pressures we felt at that time. Then there was a juxtaposition. So that was sort of a low in my emotion. Now here comes the high. The juxtaposition of the euphoria weeks later with the John Williams concert. I was on the search committee to get Carl. John Williams suggested to Carl that he consider us as we searched, and we began with a field of 200, narrowing it down to 11, and Carl was one of them. Anyway, with this symphony in 1988, on April the 1st, beautiful thoughts came into my mind. Tears came to my eyes, which I tried to brush away before the lights came on. I'd been alone in my thoughts. I had wondered how such great and inspiring experiences had come to me and to my family. Then the search began. I was on that committee. Here is the next pivotal moment. We really won when Carl came to us. Carl's first introduction to the full board, we all sat around a rectangular table, perhaps 40 of us. Carl was at the head of the table. We were then a regional orchestra. We hoped, but did not know what the future truly held. But we hoped and had confidence in Carl. As we started the evening, he asked us each our names and occupation. Then he spoke about his dreams, goals, and ideals for about 2 hours. At the end, when asked if he had anything further to say, he said, yes, let me just see if I now know you. He proceeded to name us each by name and activity. He was one, I realized, who is generous, who thinks of others, wants to be a benefit to them with his art. Indeed, he has now brought us into the Tier 1 realm, recognized nationally and internationally. Shortly after he started with us, I'm taking my phone off the hook. Shortly after he came to, oh, darn it. And I pushed a button and it took me to the wrong place. Okay. Shortly after he came to us, he came into the bank, and I wrote this about him coming to visit me in my office at the bank. One day in early 1990, I was sitting in my office. A suspicious looking bag was left on the lobby floor, and we were beginning to take notice of it and treat it as a bomb threat. At that precise time, A man dressed very casually, sunglasses, long hair, unshaven, walked through the door, looking a little disoriented and frankly, looking a little like a bum. I could see other officers in the bank start to connect this man with the mystery bag. Could he be a terrorist? A terrorist. I ran out of my office just in time to keep Carl from being taken down by some very big guys. That would have been a great welcome to a new visitor to Wells Fargo. I want to quote from Carl in 2006 at an executive committee. I've quoted from this before, but it's so meaningful to me. And here's what Carl said. What do we as musicians do? You cannot change the history of music. It is not written for entertainment. Entertainment is not the inspiration. That's not why it has come into our being. Composers are a unique group of people that tend to have the ability to reach into the ethos and pull down notes and put them on paper so that we can carnally understand them and partake of their genius and partake of their sipping of the divine. Beethoven's Ninth wasn't written for entertainment. Schubert's Ninth was not written for entertainment. We do receive enrichment. We are rewarded. We are moved. We are touched. We are challenged. We are intellectually stimulated. Here's our next pivotal moment. This is the third one and the last pivotal moment. Our European tour, our first tour abroad, emblematic of our reception. Just a short quote, and there were many of these kinds of quotes. We were so well received to sold out crowds. To quote Swiss radio, Lucerne during the European tour, sold out house, bravos and standing ovations. Now to quote from a note from Rose Corrigan, principal bassoon. When Ruth Ann and I decided to endow her chair, we met Rose Corrigan first on the European tour. Our musicians are more than musicians that bring beauty. They are caring, generous individuals. She wrote to us on May 5th, 2020, Dear Ruth Ann and John, I'm so excited to hear you've decided to endow the bassoon chair. I feel like I've been adopted. I always feel a special connection with you both. I am proud and honored to sit in this chair. I can't wait to play music again with all my colleagues in our beautiful hall for our loving audience. Love, Rose. Indeed, each musician is someone we treasure. Each musician gives to us. A year ago at our gala, I just have two more points I'm going to make. A year ago at our gala, days before everything closed down because of COVID, there were 450 of us together at the event. Carl said this in his closing comments. In closing, Jane Yada and Sandy Segerstrom Daniels, who co-chaired the gala, you have given me something this evening that will be with me until my last breath. For what you created for me here, I have no words, which is rare. I really have only feelings. And that in itself exemplifies how special it is. What you have offered me is such a blessing and such a reward that no words could begin to describe it. And to each and every one of you in this room, if the music I conduct, if what I offer you with the musicians of the Pacific Symphony has in any way allowed you to feel the elation, the joy, the thankfulness, the humbleness, the sense of pride, the sense of ambassadorship, the need for inner reflection, the need to renewing our values and recommitting to those values, if anything I do gives you those senses, then you will have an inkling of how I feel standing in front of you this evening. Yes, Carl has brought us that enlightenment, and we are fortunate. This was on his 30th anniversary. Friday, my last quote from my journal comes from Friday, June 4th, 2004. We went to the center to hear Carl St. Clair and John Williams direct the final concert of the Pacific Symphony's 25th anniversary year. Carl signed my program book with a very kind sentiment. Pacific Symphony musicians soloed. The concluding work was Williams' Stronger, Higher, faster, clearer. He composed for the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics. And here is the effect this concert this night in 2004 had on me. After a tough week I had had and sitting there in the hall with good friends, I felt an overpowering affection for everyone I knew anywhere. I felt really good. I don't know how else to say it. I reveled in this rich life I have led with Ruth Ann. If anyone can have such elevated feelings, if we can help to bring people together in kindness and desires for a better self and community, then our work at the Pacific Symphony is worth it. I wrote this: always I am comforted and inspired. Always I leave the program wanting to be a more accomplished and better person. Always I have a feeling of compassion for others. Always I feel blessed for my beliefs and understanding that I have witnessed something made possible through inspiration. I'm grateful to be associated with the Pacific Symphony, and I'm glad you all are too. Thank you.
Bravo, John. That was very, very moving. And it's an incredible privilege to work with John Evans. I think you have a feeling for what a deep person he is. And, you know, I always am stunned by the fact that he actually had a banking career. How could such a profound guy? I'm just kidding. When John reached his 25th anniversary, we were really puzzled on what we could get somebody who had contributed so much of his life to the orchestra. And our beloved chairman, John Starr, and I hatched a plan, and we ended up getting this leather motorcycle jacket with the Pacific Symphony embroidered in, because he's a great Harley Davidson motorcycle fan. So that's another aspect.
I still ride a few times a week, and I wear that jacket, and I think of you, Elizabeth.
Well, we're very excited to have Jim Self on this Zoom call. Jim is the principal tuba player of the Pacific Symphony. And, you know, when you mentioned John Williams a number of times, you know, John called on Jim Self to be his voice in many wonderful moments in film history. And Jim, it's great to have you on the call. Thanks for being here.
Can I say something?
Of course, if you'd like to.
Well, thank you all. I'm probably an unusual person to be here, but my wife and I are minor contributors to the orchestra, so that's why I got the invite. Of course, I'm the tuba player in the orchestra, and the concert that John Evans mentioned about with John Williams conducting, I was one of the soloists that night. It was a big, big night for me. And the main thing I want to say is, as a member of the orchestra, I want to thank all you who contribute your time and your money and your love of the orchestra, because this is the toughest time we've been through in many ways, and you're sustaining us in such a great way. The musicians are quite pleased from everything I've heard, and we look forward to getting back and giving you a lot of great music. Thank you.
Jim, you've just released a very significant new recording, and I'm going to give you a little shameless plug because it's extraordinary. I've been enjoying it. Yeah. What's it called? Out
on the Coast.
Yeah. And they can, how do people order your recordings?
Jimself.com. It's a website.
Yeah. You know, a great jazz artist, classical artist, really versatile musician. So thanks for joining us. I have a little bit less exciting presentation than John's. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are as an organization. I think some of you may be interested to know how we're thinking and moving ahead. So I'm going to share a screen, and give me 1 second. So let me first of all say thank you as governing members for your extraordinary support. And we're very proud that we started the governing members program as a way to not only acknowledge your generosity, but also to invite you to participate in the future of the orchestra and give us your feedback, your advice, and also to join committees of the Pacific Symphony Board of Directors. So we do hope that if you have an interest in volunteering, or learning more about committees, that should contact me personally. This is a photograph from Carnegie Hall. And I wanted to put it up front because John referred to this idea of regional, major. These are terms that go back a long way. We used to describe orchestras as, you know, community, regional, major, and of course there are sort of arbitrary demarcations. I think really the quality of playing of this orchestra has been high for a very long time. It has matured, it has grown. And in 2018, it was acknowledged by the New York Times as a major ensemble. How would we have gotten here without all of you? It would have been impossible. But I think the other side, the flip side of being an artistically outstanding orchestra is the fact that you've nurtured an orchestra that leads. And how does it lead? It commits itself to its community. In the upper left corner on your screen, you'll see Andy Honey working with a young student at a class act family night in a school. In the lower left, you'd see Santa Ana Strings students performing a concert outdoors on the plaza. That's a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Ana. In the lower right corner, you'll see a classroom visit of a Pacific Symphony member, Cindy Ellis. And then in the upper right corner, you'll see our family concert where we celebrated the Mexican tradition of Dia de los Muertos. I wanted to share with you a brief video that describes the digital work that we're doing now. I'm going to, can you all hear it?
Hello, Santa Ana Strings.
Sorry, could you hear the audio? All right, let me make sure I start that.
Yes, yeah.
Thank
I can
you.
hear it.
Give me a second, I'll get back to it.
We're very excited to be starting this new season with you. Due to COVID-19, this semester will be conducted through virtual learning.
We were having wonderful lessons at Anderson Elementary, and slam, we got hit with COVID-19. Our class act, Pacific Symphony's musicians and leaders produced digital representations of all of these events.
Arts Express is a summer arts immersion program for middle school students presented by Pacific Symphony. In contrast to our in-person program, we fully utilize the power of technology to connect us, and our passionate and dynamic staff and counselors really brought the signature Arts Express magic alive.
In the last 6 months, the Pacific Symphony has had to strategically change its way of engaging with our many diverse audiences. Our educational content has been transformed so that it can be brought to your homes entirely through a virtual experience. Programs such as Class Act, Santa Ana Strings, and our summer camp, Arts Express.
I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Class Act and Pacific Symphony for providing these incredible experiences for our students. I know it means a lot to me as a teacher, and especially, as I said, as a parent, and I'm very proud to say that we are a Class Act school, and I absolutely love everything that Class Act does for us and our community.
We were so excited when we got the email to access the online Class Act events. We made a little family night of it. We did popcorn and had snacks. And we sat on the couch and we watched it together at home. We are so grateful to the Pacific Symphony Orchestra and the Class Act program because we had a beautiful night of culture and music, and it was right in the comfort of our own home. So thank you so much to the Pacific Symphony Orchestra and Class Act program. We really, really enjoyed our at-home movie night Class Act experience.
Our team has also worked to create virtual content with our classical archive performances, musicians recording content right from their own homes, and newly produced content from musicians playing excerpts from around Orange County. We have Wednesday mixtures with Ben Smolin, our principal flutist, and have partnered with the Pacific Chorale and the American Phil Young Chorus to create an over 200-person video mosaic just for you of America the Beautiful. As we venture into our 2021 season, we're going to continue creating content that can be accessed right from our website to keep you entertained safely with your families and friends at home. We're thankful and excited that you've continued to support the Pacific Symphony, and we look forward to being back together with you in our concert hall. Be safe.
Well, I was produced a few months ago, and a lot has happened even since that video was made. I was very struck by the partnership that occurred with the orchestra committee and the union as we grappled with such unbelievably complicated issues going through this pandemic together. And it took us many months, but we finally achieved a 4-year labor agreement. And I was proud of the board for agreeing to a long-term commitment to the musicians because, for their own confidence that they can weather this very complicated period, for our ability to plan, it was really important. And that was settled back in late December. Unfortunately, we then experienced the surge. So we had to take about a month before we could bring the orchestra back onto the concert hall. And about 3 weeks ago on Saturday, literally 3 weeks to this day, we had our first meeting of orchestral ensembles on the stage. It was the first time in a year that Carl had met with the orchestra. It was an extremely emotional day. We all had been COVID tested before we arrived at the hall. Everybody was masked. And you'll see some images from that in a second. We had then released a Lunar New Year concert to celebrate a remarkable relationship we've had with our Asian American communities here in Orange County. We subsequently released a Lantern Festival program, about a 3-hour family event where there were lots of interactive activities, all online, all digitally presented. And our reach has exceeded over 500,000 in 49 countries. We've had an extraordinary, and this does not include the PBS broadcasts, which have been extremely well viewed. But digital platforms have been really meaningful in expanding the audience for Pacific Symphony. We then launched the Hal and Jeanette Segerstrom Virtual Classic Series. So every Thursday night at 7 p.m., there's a live release of the recordings that have been made the previous few weeks and edited for your viewing. And they're shorter programs, about 25 minutes in length. And I'll show you an excerpt of one in a second. Soon we'll be releasing Pop's Family and chamber music concerts as well. We're about to actually launch, it'll probably be in early April, probably the first week of April, we'll be announcing the 21-22 season. Many of you who subscribed to the 2021 season have already automatically been renewed into the 21-22 season. We took all of your payments and we've just moved them to the next fiscal year. So you don't really have to do anything if you're already subscribed. We do hope, as the protocols will allow, that we would be able to perform our 4th of July concert at Pacific Amphitheater or another site as allowed. And it's a really important date. I think some of you have heard Dr. Chow, our Orange County health leader, say that Orange County will be liberated from COVID by the 4th of July. I think what he means by that is that a sufficient number of people will be vaccinated, hopefully, to allow for some normalcy. And even the president in a speech the other night made a similar comment. So let me just play a little excerpt for you of this new release. So that was the Serenata Notturna of Mozart, and it features a string quintet housed within the larger orchestral body. And of course, you saw a number of our principal players featured. Later in that program, which you can watch now if you go to the Pacific Symphony website or Pacific Symphony YouTube page, you can watch these for 30 days after the release. You'll see the last movement of this wonderful wind serenade by Gounod, Petite Symphonie. Hope you enjoyed both of those performances. Something that I have been working on significantly during the pandemic has been government affairs. And as you can imagine, during this period, we have had a number of significant legislation that affects orchestras and arts organizations. Obviously, the most important thing that's happening nationally is vaccination, and locally there's about 605,000 doses that have been administered. That's about 19% of the adult population, and a little less than 10% have received both doses of the Moderna or Pfizer vaccines. So we still have a long way to go to get to the 75 to 80% that we need, but the pace has increased dramatically, so that's great news. Tomorrow we will be released into the red tier, and this has significant impact because in the red tier we can start performing for reduced capacity outdoors, as much as 25% in an outdoor venue of capacity. And a lot of our indoor retailers are going to begin opening up, including some restaurants with limited capacity. So economically, the red tier is a very important transition for us. I was asked to speak before the State Assembly on the issue of reopening the arts because the state of California is the last state in the country to issue guidelines about how we reopen cultural institutions. And to this day, we still don't have guidance on what we can do indoors. They've just announced what we can do outdoors. So at least we have a start and we can begin that process, but we're still waiting on the state health department to guide us. So the guidelines for outdoor performances at the yellow tier, which is a relatively low amount of COVID in our environment, would be 66% of outdoor capacity. And so we're not, even at the yellow tier, we're not going to be at full 100% Pacific Amphitheater access. And right now the guidelines only say fixed seat venues. They don't allow for, sort of unstructured seating. Everything has to be in advance seating, reserve seating. So these are really big challenges for us as we move ahead. On the local level, I'm proud to say that the cities have really stayed engaged with us. So both Irvine and Mission Viejo have confirmed that they have their budgets set for Symphony in the Cities this summer, as long as we can, produce them legally. We're working continually with the supervisors and the health department to not only respond to the state guidelines, but work with us on unique structures that we're working on today, like a mobile stage that we purchased, and we'll be sharing that exciting news soon. At the federal level, great news. $16.5 billion was offered in the form of the shuttered venue grants. It's a very significant amount of money. It's nothing ever that big has been offered to cultural institutions. The challenge is the first 28 days, that grant is available only to primarily for-profit organizations like small rock venues, movie theaters, promoters, because they're the ones who have lost 90% of their income. They're not raising money. So it's only after the first 28 days that nonprofits that raise money can participate in shuttered venue grants. So we'll be applying for what's called a payroll protection program loan tomorrow. We'll ask for $2 million to help fund orchestra salaries and staff salaries. And if we later get a shuttered venue grant, which exceeds the $2 million number that we're proposing for a loan, it'll be an incremental grant from that source. So that's a brand new, you could only apply for one or the other before. Now they allow you to apply for both and net it out. So that was really big in the recent stimulus legislation. At the state level, obviously, if we don't get indoor guidelines soon, it's going to be very difficult to assure all our patrons that, we can return on September 30th, which is our opening night. But we do anticipate that'll come within the next 30 days. So what's the next chapter? And I'm looking at these as sort of bracketed periods of time. From April 1 to June 30th, we're going to continue our digital work. We'll have weekly programming online. We'll begin to announce a series of small outdoor concerts on a mobile stage. And that will require some guidance from our local health officials on how we align with the state guidelines. We'll launch our 21-22 season ticket campaign. I really hope that all of you who have already subscribed to 2021 will encourage your friends to subscribe. We're going to have to rebuild our audiences, rebuild our confidence in coming back for live performances. So anything you can do to act as ambassadors on our behalf will be greatly appreciated. Then I look at the next chapter, July 1 to September, and I put a question mark because I'm not sure when that transition from outdoor to indoor will take place. We're hoping to launch, as I said, a 4th of July concert. We'll resume more of those outdoor ensemble performances. And then I think we're going to continue our summer series as late into August as possible. But the challenge there is that Live Nation, the Orange County Fair, and all of these outdoor commercial enterprises, they're also going to backload their summer schedules. So getting availability of venues is going to be one of the tricky parts of programming a summer season, because everybody's aiming for August and September. We have a number of Pops concerts. For those of you who are Pops patrons, we had to announce a postponement of 3 major Pops concerts. It was Pink Martini, Rolling Stones, and Star Wars versus Star Trek. And we're hoping that prior to mid-September, we can reschedule those 3 outdoors. That's what we're going to do to accommodate and acknowledge the wonderful generosity of so many patrons who donated their tickets or had them put on account. And then beginning September 30th, we're hoping we're indoors. We're hoping that we're at 100% capacity. I think we can manage if we're at 50% capacity or higher. One of the real challenges is the reconciling of 6 feet distancing and 50% capacity. You can't do both. If you're at 6 feet distancing, you only can get 20% capacity into the concert hall. So what I've been advocating is what the Germans have proven is safe, which is checkerboard seating patterns, where you have two individuals sitting together, and then the 2 seats directly in front of them are left empty, the 2 seats directly behind them are left empty, and 1 seat to either side. If you do that, then you can achieve 50% capacity. If we're not allowed to do that, it's going to be very tricky. And we're going to then offer live streaming. For those people who are still hesitant to come to the concert hall, they can allocate their subscription to a live stream experience on digital formats. I wanted to share with you that on June 12th, we're going to try something. We're going to be outdoors. We're going to put an orchestra on the stage for the first time in front of an audience. And we're going to honor Charlie and Ling Zhang, 2 of our most generous philanthropists. It'll be chaired by Joanne Leatherby and Leona Sadaka, 2 of our most illustrious patrons. And we invite you to come and celebrate with us at Oso Viejo Park, the site of our Symphony and Cities concert. So it'll be a very elegant evening, but it'll be for the first time we've ever done our gala outdoors and with our orchestra performing. So these are really exciting efforts that we're making, and I think we'll be the first out of the gate to try and be live and in front of all of you. And the city of Mission Viejo is very, very supportive of this effort. And then lastly, with regard to finances, our budget prior to the pandemic in March was projected to be 22 million, and now it's just around 12 million. We are 97% philanthropy. We have no earned revenue at this point. We've budgeted, I think, about $66,000 of revenue for year end, June 30th. The earned revenue that we do have will be just some modest charges because everything we've been offering to the public has been free, but we are going to charge for some of our Pops programming and the opera that we do release. We're planning to do La Traviata in a digital format. John and Mary, two of our illustrious philanthropists, have issued a challenge grant. Any new or increased philanthropic commitments before June 30th will be matched dollar for dollar up to $1 million. It's a really important challenge grant. I really, really hope that we hit that number, because I think it's also a signal to John and Mary that these kinds of efforts matter. And hopefully, again, in the future, they'll consider something like that. The building you see in the lower left corner is our administrative home. It's the first time we've had a dedicated facility, and Charlie and Ling just donated it to us, a $6.2 million contribution. So we no longer have to pay rent, just utilities and maintenance. It's a credible gift. So that's one of the reasons we'll honor them at our gala. So I wanted to pause, stop sharing screen, and see if I can answer, or John Evans can answer any questions. Just unmute yourself if you have a question and speak up. Elizabeth Starr is raising her hand. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I want to first of all say that you and John Evans get an A+ for your efforts through this ordeal. We could not have done it without both of you, and my big applause for you. I also want to say that I desperately want the youth orchestra program to begin in the fall. We need to get these kids back in the door. We need to have our fourth group so that we accommodate more children, because it makes such a difference in these kids' lives to have this program.
Couldn't agree more. I think that there's an alignment with the public school openings as well.
Yes.
I think as the school teachers feel more confident, as the students feel more confident, as the parents feel more confident, all of those things align, and we will definitely get them up and running. And, we've been very careful to, protect their well-being, and we have these Sunday mixers with our youth orchestra members, youth wind ensemble members, and so forth. But it's not the same as being together. So, yeah. Elizabeth, thanks for everything you have done. Public acknowledgement.
Thank you.
And John, transformational figures for the Pacific Symphony. And recently, we received $1 million endowment gift from the Stars as a legacy for John's amazing leadership. And we, of course, mourn his loss and miss him very much. So
I remember when we used to go to Santa Ana High School to have concerts, and you weren't sure your car was going to be there when you came back out. We made a lot of progress.
So as I'm hearing about people who have done a lot for us, I'm looking on my screen and I see many other friends here that I feel really close to, and appreciate my association with them over the years. Janice, I'm looking at you, and Ellie and Mike, I'm looking at you. Jim, of course, as part of the orchestra, and other newer friends. Great appreciation. And Goran, also my association at UCI, I treasure immensely, and I'm glad you're here and that we have that partnership.
Anybody else have questions that we can answer? We didn't cover things that have been on your mind. Bill?
John, Bill Beck, can you give us an update on Arts Express and what's going on with that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Arts Express, if you're not aware of it, was featured a bit in the video I shared. It's our summer immersion camp that was created back in the 1999, summer of '99, and it's 150 students that stay overnight. Now it's at Concordia College. It's like a residential arts immersion camp. So one of the key questions for this summer, of course, is will we be allowed to bring them back live? Believe it or not, the state has to issue guidelines on summer camps. That's a very big issue for a lot of parents. So as soon as we have a better sense of whether we can, put the protocols in place to bring the campers back, we have to make that decision. Last summer, the entire camp was done virtually, and it was actually really successful. I mean, I have to give Allison Levinson and her team an amazing credit. She put together a fabulous faculty, and the faculty were working with the students every day. And, for a lot of parents, having their kids engaged for hours every day in artistic activities was a huge relief to them. So I think, obviously we'd prefer it to be live and immersive like it usually is, but we just have to wait and see. I have a reasonable level of confidence that, we'll be able to do it this summer.
Good.
Thank you, John.
Anybody else like to ask a question or make a comment? Share a memory?
Well, since everybody's so quiet, I'll give a little commercial for Jim, and thanks for joining again on governing members. You heard that he's a fantastic career in studio work and movies. And if you want to hear more, I think it's on the 18th. Jim, Barry Perkins, and Richard Kaufman are going to have a virtual event, and they're going to talk about their experience in studio work, specifically probably with John Williams. And I invite you all to tie into that one. I'm sure I think it's March 18th. Is that right, Ashlyn? Okay. So just sign up for that, and you'll get a lot of interesting and entertaining information on what it's like to work in the studios.
Before we sign off, because you've all been wonderful, and I wanted to just acknowledge the staff that's on the team on this call today. So we have Ashlyn Ronkus. Wave your hand. Ashlyn was recently promoted to a stewardship position at the Pacific Symphony, and by that we mean, providing you with insight as to how your investments make a difference. And she still coordinates the Bach Circle. If you're not a Bach Circle member, she can talk to you about it, but it's a great experience. So thank you, Ashlyn. You've been a wonderful colleague. And she's a terrific violinist, by the way. Let's see, we have Chris Trella, a former colleague. Chris was director of public relations, and he's a terrific journalist and writer, and he made a very generous gift at our gala. So Chris, good to see. I don't see your face, but I'm glad you're on the call. Michael Lawler, wave your hand there, Michael. Michael is heading up he's a director of individual giving for the symphony. Recently also promoted. He's doing a great job with governing members, and he is a key liaison for this group. So you can always reach out to Michael. And Nikki Pally's on the call, long time, just celebrated her 16th anniversary on the development team. And it's very hard to year after year raise money and engage and build an annual fund. And Nikki, she really describes all of you as her family and is the major reason why she's stayed with the symphony all these years. So I thank Nikki for her dedication to raising funds for the Pacific Symphony. So I want to make sure that all of our staff are recognized. And again, I just want to thank all of you as governing members, and John Evans. What a great presentation. It really dawns on me that we have made a real error at the institution, which is to not capture more oral histories from all of you. So many of you on this call have wonderful memories, and we have got to start documenting it more thoroughly. I mean, I bet Jim Self could just tell you a million stories about the Pacific Symphony, and fun ones, not only the crazy stuff that happened in the early days, but also just remarkable, artistic journeys we've had. Ellie and Mike and so many others on this call. So we'll get to that. That's a key part of our future, is to begin building the archives of the Pacific Symphony. All right, Bill, anything else before we head off?
Oh,
Ellie wants to say something.
Oh, Ellie, right.
You're on mute.
Unmute yourself.
There we go.
Okay, now you're good.
I just want to thank both Johns for putting on such a great program today. It was John Evans. Your stories are always amazing. I love you. And John Forsyte, member of our family. So what can I say? Except thank you.
Thanks for making time.
Well, I want to thank everybody for participating. I hear from Ellie. It was a very enjoyable presentation. John Evans, very good stories on the Pacific Symphony history, and John, the future and the the direction that our Pacific Symphony is taking. And again, everybody have a nice weekend, and we will announce our next coffee conversation probably in April. So thanks again. Everybody be safe.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Bill.
everyone. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Ashlyn, thanks again for putting this together.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.